Hello, hello, and welcome to this edition of the Law Firm Blueprint. Boy, Seth, it's been a while. I'm Jay Ruane, and that guy over there is Seth Price. He is down in DC. He's done with his travels. I'm done with mine. We are here at the end of July, and we are back live with you for another wonderful edition of this show. Seth, it's been a while, so what's new, man? How's your
What's
week?
new?
I'd say how's your week going, but I could probably say how's your month going?
It has been a great run. Just getting out of the office, getting away from kids. Took the wife. We made it to Australia for a couple weeks. Stopped in Dubai for a few days. Going
Just
talk
stopped in
about
Dubai.
stopped in Dubai, and this is the piece, like a headline out of Dubai, right? So go there and you see the TikToks, and if Jay Ruane were in charge of the state of Connecticut and there was no environmental, no permitting, not that it had to be safe, but you decided where a building went, how it would be, who would get the money to do it. It is unbelievable when you have one person in charge of a country, what you can get done. I mean, they have neighborhoods. There's a neighborhood of the Marina, business neighborhood, where they have like 7 buildings the size of the World Trade Center. Like,
Wow.
and they're built in 3 years apiece. Like,
Yeah, and like 1,400 people die for
I,
each one that's built.
I mean, there it is. Essentially, you don't want to see the sausage making,
No.
but they needed we needed a train line in DC, the Purple Line, which is going to connect the spokes of our metro system. It's a light rail. They can't dig anything. They can't possibly do that. It is a light rail along a bike trail. It's going to be 10 years and billions of dollars. They built 70 kilometers of beachfront in the islands you see, the Palm Islands. They're sort of that very pretty, like they built that in 6 years, soup to nuts. Yes, I'm sure that it was, not to say, I'm sure environmental issues, although they talk environmental a ton. But when you have a person that says, we're going to do this and it gets done, it is amazing. It's obviously you're right to talk about negatives, but it is unbelievable. Like when there is focus and a single voice, what can be accomplished.
Well, I think that goes, right to the heart of what we're talking about here in the show, right? In the Law Firm Blueprint, because you really need to have one person making the decisions and moving your business forward. And that could be a problem. I got to tell you, the last 6 weeks for me have been tumultuous at best, stressful without a doubt. I have undergone the biggest turnover in my firm since we started.
Wow.
We have had 5 lawyers ranging from 3 to 8 years with us all leave in different things, including the person who was sort of my director of legal ops. And while that has been going on, I have stepped back more into the business necessarily, just because of manpower, woman power, lawyer power.
You're now, the idea that you're taking off is not on the table. Like
There's no way. It's funny. There's no way that I was taking off anything this summer as of June 27th, right? So about a month ago, when the final pieces fell into place, But it's funny, and I'm going to shout out our friend of the show, Mike Mogul. I had a very, very shitty day with stuff just breaking. And he posted something on Facebook, and he said, just the time when things, something to the effect, I'm going to paraphrase it, was, while things may be falling apart, they may be really falling into place. And that gave me a little hope. In fact, I meant to send him a note card about his post, and I haven't. I need to do that because, man, we are a month away from that, and I have never been happier and feeling better about the direction of our firm. I revamped everything. Turnover sucks, especially when it's people who know what they're doing and you have to bring in new people. But boy, I'm in a lucky spot. I'm still understaffed by 2 lawyers. I need to hire 2 more. I still have a lawyer who's out on FMLA who won't be back until October. But I talked to him, and he's getting healthy and he's feeling confident, and he actually wants to move to be closer to a love interest into a courthouse that we don't service, but we always get calls for. So we might be able to bring in new business at the latter half of the year. So like things are starting to like flow. And I'm feeling happier that I'm back in a little bit. So for all those people who are like, I can't wait to get out, I can't wait to get out, then you get out and you see, hey, I may like to actually be in the game. Like our friend
Well, look, but there's
Ryan says,
also,
I'm a hammer in search of a nail.
well, look, there's the two things. It doesn't matter. It's moot right now because you don't have the ability to get out. Right now, your labor is needed. Your
Yeah,
leadership is needed. You can't just
my
not,
leadership is
it's not you,
my
right.
labor in the courts is not needed anymore, but my leadership is definitely needed, and I'm enjoying
You're,
being more actively leading.
right. But you're not fireproof right now.
Right,
You
I'm
need
not
to
fired.
build, right. And so the question, look, something that I've seen over time, we've talked to friends of the show know we have been running we've been, we've talked a lot about the turnover in the first through third years and the risks of people during that time. It's awesome because they're cheap and they're new and you can mold them, but very often lots of things happen, whether it be interpersonal with love interests, whether it be deciding a different area of law, public
Yeah,
versus private sector. And that when you get that third to eighth year, that historically, I've loved that as a sweet spot because people know what they're doing, hopefully not trained badly, and yet they're not so experienced that they're burnt out and or sort of set for a career. And I feel like the scary part of what you're talking about here is that third to eighth year turnover, right? Well, I always judge my turnover based on, is this, how many people have I lost? And I used to be able to say it was almost zero, probably a couple over the years of people you really didn't want to lose versus you didn't want to lose them, but like it
right.
was. And I think the piece that I have seen, and I can speak to it from the criminal point of view because we've scaled that and I've seen it in volume. I mean, on the PI side, there's always an upgrading. And I've seen that as the firm is more established, we have our numbers better so that we can pay more accurately based on the labor done. But what I've seen on the criminal side, and I think this is probably true for family and other areas, is that you get people that can do the job because this is what you're dealing with. None of those people are being fired by you. They're all there. But I don't know how many of them were plodding along. And some of them may be people you really didn't want to lose, and it's devastating. And that's the ones we care about the most. But something we've seen is Dave always talks about it like somebody who might be a unionized teacher who does just the minimum.
Right.
There are great teachers, and then there are people who sort of just check the box to whatever the union contract requires. And I think that one of the things that I've seen is that when those things move on, whether our choice or their choice, that is where we went from one guy who was doing literally to a T, $240,000 gross a year as a single widget, right? Not very impressive. Doing the bare minimum not to get himself fired, to the next guy who came in with the same caseload was doing seven figures. Now, right. What does that mean? It means like you need better tracking of what's going on. But when you don't have critical mass, when you have somebody at a courthouse, you can't tell whether those leads aren't converting because of the person or because of everything around it. So that what I'm hoping for you, and it's not good to have it in mass, obviously, is that if you have people that aren't there and into it, and have either burnt out, were never into it in the first place, whatever the defect is, that when you get that turnover, whether yours or theirs, that there's an opportunity, which I think is why you're excited, to bring in fresh blood who can take $240,000 worth of gross to 600. That's a big difference to your bottom line. And especially, that my philosophy has been a percentage of gross, so that when you have somebody who's okay with an $80,000 salary, you're like, no, you want the guy who wants 250 or 300,000 and share the wealth and really give them that platform. I feel like I hope for you that this is the opportunity. Downside, as you've said, is that it's slimmer and slimmer pickings of great motivated talent based on the restrictions and what's coming out of law school.
Yeah. So actually one of the new hires, it's interesting because the last person who resigned 2 weeks ago, I think resigned because that lawyer was aligned with our former director of legal ops, who had also resigned a month before, and took the FMLA, but clearly that was a ruse, and was planning on doing it. And I found out actually on my vacation that they had applied for a job in another for the state. That gets into a whole nother area that's not worthy of wasting anybody's time on. But the good thing about the people that I have now is I'm in charge. They know I'm in charge, and there's no more fracturing of teams. And interesting. I had heart to hearts with my staff. I have four solid paralegals who've been with me anywhere ranging from 10 to 20 years, right? And so when all this stuff went down about a month ago, I said I want to do a Zoom with y'all, and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk. And without a beat, all of them said, "We're so glad that you're back. The only reason we stayed was because of you. The last 6 to 9 months have been torture with the management style of the person who's left. We couldn't be happier, and we're willing to do whatever it takes to get this because you've been so loyal to us. We are loyal to you." And they all came together. And number one, it was really exciting to me about that. Number two, I think it speaks to culture, that these people knew the culture prior to the changes and want to get back to that, which I think is going to be great. But number three, it also talks about how I decided to sort of flip up and change everything. And I went with a pod style breakdown now, whereas before it was sort of like you were assigned your courthouses, but there wasn't a team that goes around with it. And this pod system that I learned more about at the Fireproof Weekend with John and Mike Morse has really sort of taken off, like to the point where these people they love each other. It's like
I get it, and let me be cynical for a minute, right? Great. I love the fact you have the pods. Nobody's gotten rich betting against Mike Morris. So if you're using his methodologies, assuming they apply to you, great. But I feel like this is a bigger tale of caution for everybody, present company included, which is that as you go through the process of scaling, right? Not everybody's going to find a knock Hazel as that first hire or pay enough to get that person. And that when you do that, there are real issues. I can speak personally. I brought in, we lost our guy off the motorcycle. We were in the desert for quite a while. We brought somebody in who's good, but in a place where they were moving up through the ranks, and that there were issues early on.
Yeah.
So, like management style, like this is somebody who was in a number 2 position in their firm, amazing talent, and we'll get there. And Bill Biggs is coaching and is going to be an incredible talent long term. But there were definitely bumps along the way, and that the idea that, hey, I found a person and I'm good, like you don't want to micromanage. At the same time, if you don't have a finger on the pulse of what's going on, it's buyer beware on your part, which is if you put an ass in place and say, hey, I'm going off to the beach, I don't need to be here anymore, like that person represents you. And that if that person's effing up, it's you, it's not them.
Absolutely. And I think, your people, they do look to you and how you run things. And at the end of the day, you're always going to be, the boss, right? And people with relationships with you may want to come to you. And when you've gone for 20 years of having an open door, come in, let's talk to me, let's solve this, we're all on the same team, and then somebody comes in and tries to manage, saying these are the clear lines of communication, you shouldn't talk to another team member because they're not, you're independent of them, and it just changes things. It's just
once you hear that, there are lines of direct reports and stuff, but isn't that just one of those weird, as you're saying it to me, just in a vacuum, when you hear those words, don't, like you shouldn't speak to, like, again, there may be a place for that at some level, but when you hear those and you hear it just like sounds like nails on a chalkboard, like it really, something isn't right when you're hearing direction like don't do that. Now, very often it wasn't actually said that way and somebody took it that way or wanted to take it that way to create conflict. But that to me is one of those moments, whether it's the person saying it, the receiver, or somewhere in between, something clearly isn't right.
Well, and unfortunately for me, that sort of stuff was hidden from me. And so it was, I was getting the everything's great speech, and I was being, kept, I guess, in some respect, away from the frontline people who would speak the truth to me. And
I've heard that over the years, like in multiple things, like, you don't really like that. And I think the truth is always somewhere in between, but I've heard, as you say those words, I can think of over 20 years situations where somebody who's between me and employees would say, hey, they're telling you, they're sort of sugarcoating it to you and kissing your ass while they run things the way they run it. And part of it is like managing people is really, really tough. We're hiring people. Historically, none of us have paid, multiple six figures for any of the talent that we've had leading those people. And so all of a sudden, you're putting people without formal training in a position where, it's like you've gotten this far, not that like by any means I'm a great leader, but I know that I've heard those words back about people that I've liked in leadership that, oh, you're hearing one thing, but what's their ability to lead and how they're messaging things down is not nearly where you'd want it to be. But then again, if we were in those two, if I videotaped you in leadership, would it be perfect? Would it be perfect? Somebody, no. Like that's the problem. Everybody has their own agenda.
And my thing is, I don't need to be perfect in my role. And this is my philosophy, because I bear all the risk here. And so if I'm imperfect and I screw something up, well, I screwed it up and I got to deal with the consequences because I take on that risk.
Is that a lazy man's approach? Because you have all those, because I know you feel you can screw up, but these people that you're only paying them so much. They can only do so much. Yeah. And it's sort of like, if you can't do it and you're Jay Ruane, how do you expect some guy or girl, woman who you're paying like $1.22 to carry that mantra?
Well, and that's one of the things, you talked about how, as you start to grow and scale a firm that's other than PI. I mean, PI is such an outlier because you could have one case that every December
most of them don't. That's also a misnomer. In order to be in business, you got to run a lot of cases generally.
Sure. No, but the revenue hits you get in PI come after the work has been done. So in that respect, like you're financing yourself, you're bootstrapping the stuff. With the people like fee for service, criminal, trust and estates, family, bankruptcy, that type of thing, they're getting paid up front, and that's going to pay the lights this week, and then you got to do the work afterwards. So you don't necessarily have
but theoretically, that's why it's so important not to do that. That's the business model that fails, right? You got to be planning it in such a way, both ethically, depending on jurisdiction, as well as practically. If you take that as earned money and then you have to run cases, that's not.
And the main point that I want to make is that it's only when you get to a certain level of revenue, and I don't know if it's 2 or 3 or 4 maybe million, but you're at that point, you're going to get to a point where you're going to have the ability to a little pay over market, hire better talent that's going to allow you to then accelerate even more. So it's like one of these things where it's like, I really feel, I remember those days well, that, when you're under 7 figures and you're like stalled. I can remember 3 years in a row where like our gross revenue hit 990 and didn't make it over. Right. And you're stalled because that limits the talent that you can hire. That limits the the resources you can put at it. I mean, I think now people are starting to see, man, if we can, go to remote workers, overseas workers, we can do things at a scale and that type of thing.
It's funny because going to tangent alert. We just had our quarterly for Blue Shark, which was amazing. Seeing a non-law firm do its quarterly with motivated people that are all in sync. It was, used Caesar, Adam Ross, and this guy, friend of the show. And basically one of the things that struck me as it was there, one of our issues that we're sort of struggling with is, hey, thanks to Jay Ruane's kick in the ass, both Blue Shark and Price Benowitz have a Latin American workforce, probably about 35 people each. And that's great until, again, this isn't 1 or 2. This isn't like, hey, I hired somebody from Get Staffed Up and I'm managing. As you scale, it's like, oh, well, if you have a weakish employee managing them, all of a sudden they're not that efficient. And while, it sounds like it's a panacea, 2 overseas people all in is now like what, that may be $25,000 a year. And all of a sudden, if you're not managing $25,000 a year well, you start to see margin issues.
Yeah.
So it's again, this is not the $2 an hour Philippines person we talked about years ago. So anyway, I go to that each of these things that we do comes with additional issues that we layer on top. Sorry for the tangent.
No, tangents are fine. I mean, that's what this show's about. We kind of go off on these things. I mean, so speaking of tangents, I want to, interesting thing that I did over the last couple of weeks is I watched the second season of The Bear on Hulu. I don't know if you've seen this show.
I'm struggling through the first. I hear now you're the fourth person who said it's amazing. I got to struggle through it and get myself to the point where you were so excited about it.
All right. So, and I'll probably watch at least one episode on my flight, tomorrow. I'm going out to Los Angeles for a couple of days with my oldest daughter. So I'm going to load up the iPad. Episode 7 of season 2. One of the characters, Richie, goes and becomes a stage at what is supposed to be, I think, a Chicago version of 11 Madison Park. Just the top high-end restaurant and that type of thing. And it's all about delighting the customer. In fact, he's reading the book from the guy from 11 Madison Park, Unreasonable, whatever. It's got a yellow cover. And it's interesting. One of the throwaway lines is when he asks the question, he's like, "So how do you find out about your customers here, your restaurant diners?" And the throwaway is, "Well, we have a person dedicated to just stalk their social media, right?" So I sent a quick message out and I said, "Why don't we have somebody remote overseas just stalking social media of our clientele for, stress marks or things to celebrate so that we can wow them and surprise them?" So now we have somebody, we're going to pay them like $1,000 a month, and their job is merely to because we're doing 2,000 clients, 2,500 clients this year. Why are we not paying attention to those social signals? Not to necessarily friend request them, but if they're putting it out publicly, let's follow that stuff and see if they're on TikTok or if they're on Instagram, like most people are, and we can start to see what they're saying and posting, and they got a new job. So for a modest investment, I mean modest, right now on my bottom line of $12,000 a year, I now have somebody overseas, Crisette, and Crisette's going to be looking at everybody's social media and checking. And I'm going to see what happens. We'll
that actually sounds like an AI future project.
Oh, totally.
Because think about it. The other thing is when you get that, you have to find the profile, which for unusual names easy, not unusual names harder. And which is, again, I'm just going through this, like where is this going to be in 3 weeks when you get this sort of first update? Second, they have to be public, which is not everybody. You and I don't care, and so the question is, what do you actually learn versus an 11 Madison, where these are, public figures for the most part at some level, public with a lowercase p. So, I think that what I love about hanging out with
$6,000 flyer, basically, But you can get through like something like Lexus, Accurant. You can do a social media locator for people. So there are resources to.
No, I understand. Those are not free. And next thing you know, you're, and so it's just fascinating. I smile that I feel like Hanel's sitting in the corner and we're having one of these discussions with how are you going to take it on? And to a certain extent, you're going to find like is that usable or monetizable? Is it?
It may not be.
Yeah,
it may totally not be, but I have done crazy things in my firm for years to just take flyers. And actually, that brings me. Let's talk about this at the end of the show, because this is something that I think since the beginning of the year we've really followed the profit first model, right? And so here's the question I have for you, and I know the model is every quarter you take out the money. And take it as your profit, right? And then that's what you should do. I have not done that yet. So now I am 2 quarters in and the money's just sitting in my profit first account. I have made the quarterly tax payments that I have to make as if I took the money. So it's not like I'm hurting myself, but I kind of just keep the money there for things like this, for ideas, for flyers, and reinvest it in my business. Like at what point do you say, okay, I'm going to pull it out of the firm? Because I'm like, I'd rather invest. What do I buy, real estate or invest in my firm? My firm has a better upside.
Well, a couple things. First, I don't not fully follow, because if you're doing the profit first, follow the freaking mantra. And then the question is, if it's sitting in your home bank account, do you want to spend that $1,000, or do you want to have an adventure in LA with your daughter for $1,000? Like, which one makes which? So first, and then second is, if you're going to do it, I assume the question is, do you have an R&D budget, and why is it not just coming out of that?
That's a great question I have. Does Price Benowitz have an R&D budget?
Not specifically. We're probably not the people to follow, because we are less disciplined, in the sense that if something comes up where we, for instance, I knew that Bill Biggs would be valuable in helping to build up the person I was talking about earlier on the show. And I was like, okay, we're going to
tell about who Bill Biggs is for our listeners.
Sure. Bill Biggs is a guy who ran a very prestigious Texas PI shop. He is now a consultant on culture and processes in the PI space primarily. An amazing speaker. He spoke at Fisher's event not too long ago. Every time he speaks, he's just a wow guy. And I was like, look, that to me is one of those investments. Coaching means a lot of things to a lot of people. There are plenty of different opportunities, different tribes and fiefdoms, from Vista to Crisp to, the Godoy Mastermind of Fisher. All these different people are out there doing different things. To me, some of the R&D that I've sort of pushed my expendable money to, it's a write-off, meaning it's coming pre-tax, is the idea of how do I empower people more with tools and training. And again, early on, when we first met, there was always that truism, train your people, they might leave. Don't train them, they might stay. Right. That was sort of one of those maxims. And I feel that as I've scaled, the piece that is hardest, and I see this across two different businesses, is the mid-level management or management in general that's not you. And that anything that you can do in those places, I think, is incredibly valuable. And there are other areas of R&D like social, and you're always doing paid video and getting great CPM and, finding ways to brand. But, there's a certain amount. I just had it at our law firm quarterly. There was some pushback to lead gen sources that I was testing. And there's no panacea. There's no like, go here and do this. But there was sort of a, hey, why are you spending money on this? And I'm like, look, I'm not doing this. I'm not making any money from it. But if with education and with somebody who hasn't burnt anybody I know, there's a possibility that something may work. We test things and we see what goes on. And the question is, don't let it go on too long. Buy $10,000 worth of leads. If it works, great. It's not going to be a remarkable number. And there was a lot of sort of like, hey, you're going to high five me if it works. If one doesn't work, that's that. You don't want to punish the person who's trying stuff. So to answer your question, not specifically an R&D budget, but there is a real push to look for opportunities of things that will help us move things forward.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I always, I brought this up years ago to my father when we were building this practice. I said, how come we don't have an R&D? He goes, all those seminars you go to get better as a lawyer, that's part of your R&D budget. He's like, you're learning about breath testing or field tests or chemical testing or drugs. He's like, that's part of your R&D budget
right,
as a lawyer. That's the
old school version.
And then he's like, so you need to have an R&D budget to be better as a business owner. And that's listening to things like our podcast and going to seminars. You also need, if you're still in the business, you need learn some stuff and develop yourself as a better person to provide the product. And I think the great thing about it is if you go to either of those, you can learn something about the other one, which is kind of cool. It's interesting. There's a ton of stuff online. There's a ton of Zoom. There's a lot of conferences out there, but there's really something missing in the how to run your business better, overall. Which is unfortunate. I
right. You see pieces of it. You see the profit first. You see the business of law tracks at NTL. You see all those different things, even the masterminds in each of those things. And it's tough because I think that there's no one size fits all. You saw this, right? Fireproof is a pretty good roadmap for PI firms. There's a lot of positives in it, but it's really not that applicable until they do modules outside. I'd say within Blue Shark, the great thing, and that's sort of something I pride myself on, is they can use sites like a Price Benefit to test things. Hey, do these links work before it's almost like a comedian who goes and tries stuff out somewhere else. Because if you aren't encouraging your people to file that random motion that isn't part of your normal procedure, but like, hey, is it possible we're gonna get better discovery if we do it this way? Like, I think part of that is cultural in having your team members, and again, whether it's budget, you called it very formally, or whether it's allowing people that freedom. When you look at the stuff from Starbucks, like the Frappuccino coming out of some guy screwing around in the store, that have a culture of experimentation in order to allow that. Because if everybody's looking at, hey, what is my margin for my department, and not allowed and not high five when they try stuff, because you learn a lot from failing as much as you do from succeeding.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if I definitely have learned a ton from my failures. One of the things that I'm really jazzed about is some of these AI tools that are allowing you to start doing video using AI to dynamically insert client names, so you could have mass scaled of personalized stuff. I mean, that's one of the things that I think really made Starbucks, right? It's mass customization. Everybody gets exactly the drink they want, but they're able to do it at such scale because they have a base of coffee and then all your mix-ins and the different way
you're putting the name on the
name on the cup.
Different. It's also very different. The handwritten name, which I don't get as much anymore because everything's electronic, versus the typed out name that comes from your account.
Yeah, totally. You know what I used to do? I'm going to tell you something that I used to do when I first started going into Starbucks. My buddy Marty, I don't know if you've ever met him when we've been around. So Marty was working as a manager at a local Starbucks. So I used to go in and I would give my name as Shahid, and I would spell it Shithead, which if you
I'll follow you.
So I would say, they're like, your name, I'd be like Shahid, and they'd be like, okay. And so they'd write it on the thing, and then they would put it up there and be like, iced tea for, and they wouldn't know. I'd be like, that's me, just to get a laugh out of people. I do that also when I'm doing the Costanza at the restaurant, and I put in my name. I'll put in Shahid just to see if people call it out. Call it right. That one. I've been watching a lot of Seinfeld lately, so I'm kind of just
I've been enjoying that with my kids. And compared to Friends, a lot fewer cringe moments. There's no outward hate of trans people and stuff like that. So they seem to have...
Seinfeld. I mean, it's amazing. Those episodes are like 35 years old now, and they're holding up. But so here's the interesting thing. If you people in the audience are watching Seinfeld and you also watch Curb Your Enthusiasm.
It's
okay. So in one of the first 2 seasons of Seinfeld, I don't know what episode it was, but clearly it was a Larry David episode. Kramer comes in and talks about a car periscope. And Larry David brings that up like last season in a Curb Your Enthusiasm. He talks about his car needing a periscope. I'm like, this guy is so neurotic and fixated that probably 40 years later, he's still writing a script bringing up the same topic.
And I would say that I took some time away from Seinfeld, because once you get into Curb and you're into it, you realize that middle America was not ready for Larry David, and it was so watered down.
Yeah.
Like, it's Larry David, but it's a watered down, sanitized version. The depravity is so extreme that when you watch Curb, you're like, oh, that's the full test,
the full Monty. That's everything.
That's full calf.
All right, boy, we've been talking nonstop. We could probably do this for another 2 hours, but I don't want to make the people listen to us for so long. So I think we should wrap it up. What do you say, Seth?
Absolutely. This is good to be back.
It is good to be back. Thank you so much for being with us. That brings us to the end of another episode of the Law Firm Blueprint. Of course, you can catch us on the go on any of the podcasting platforms. You can find us on Apple and Spotify and Google Podcasts and Buzzsprout and blah, 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 all the different ones that are out there. But of course, if you are watching, please give us a 5-star review so that you can follow us, and make sure that you also subscribe so that you get new episodes as soon as they are released. That's going to do it for me, Jay Ruane, up here in Connecticut, and Seth Price down there in DC. We'll be with you again soon. We'll see you every Thursday, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 p.m. Pacific, live in our Facebook group. And if you aren't a member, please join. It's called the Law Firm Blueprint, of course. All right, Seth, I'm going to call it now. Have a great one. We'll see you later. Bye for now.